Hamshach Chaim Beis. What's the date today? The date today is Early Beis Shvat, Toshin Samates, Hamshach Chaim Beis Chelik Aleph, Omod Tov Mem Ches, Kolev L'Sof Dibur HaMascho Vayem Hashem Avram Lech Lecho. And so we saw the effect in Nefesh of Dugmas Aveda Berusa de Liber in the Keteros. And we began with the Biur, the Keteros how it is in the Heichal. In other words, Keteros B'derech HaRogel. And we saw that that's Al Derech with the Inyan from Makif de Chayo. And we saw that the difference between that and the Aveda She'al Pitam V'das is that the Ava Gilui Amidus Anim Shochim Alidei Aveda B'tam V'das is that the Kelim Otekoiches are Malim and the Machase, not so much Malim, but the Machase and Magbil, the Gilui of the Ava, and therefore it's only a Ha'orah which is Miskalet through the Leiv and the other Koiches where the Av is Magia, and therefore it's only a Ha'orah Bilvad which is Magia El Machshava Dibur Maisa and Poel Mamish. Therefore, the Shinuim in the Av mi Shas HaTfilah, the Achrei HaTfilah, Misalim Minyan HaAv v'chulu, come on the previous Omid. And therefore, Sochosov, the Adam is Nishar B'Tivi Yusei or Afilo B'Chumri Yusei, as we saw. However, in the Aveda of Rusa de Liber, there's a bittul in Etzem HaMahus. And we saw that that's Puel a Nagia in the Chumias B'Tivius of the Adam. And so we saw that the kasha was the imi yes, right on the bottom of Tov Mem Zayin, sha'ava hi mitzada neshama atzmo. In other words, that's how the neshama is misoyerer. Kilo beli nagia elaguf. In other words, these are the Rusa de Liber is in etzem neshama. When we say etzem, also putting gedorim of the etzem neshama. Ja, de Lamaila mi slapjes elakuf or in the goof, and that's a Yisrael's ruchnias betachlis. So what does it really have to do with the goof? It's not for that aspect of the neshama which is melubish and benegia elakuf. No, that's in yoni l'chera with the Lamaila mi aguf, and that's a kasha that imi yesh ahavi mitzad aneshama atzmo. Nonetheless, we saw that mikol machim har is in a geya ela a TVS that reaches the inyan of the TVS, meaning the TVS gufnias, yeah, the TVS mitzad inyan agashmin shara odom, dainu gufay, v'nafshay v'hamiyas, v'alidei zeh nase bittul amahus. Well, that causes a bittul in the very essence of the bench. Like we see in Perikov Test, for example, in Tanya, that Koloid, that the mensch is not a tzaddik and he's only a Bainmani, then we see that over there, the Tivius of the Nefesh HaBahamias, that is really the Etzema, that's really the Etzema Odom, that's him, that's his Mahutz. And it's only people like Hillel Azokin, if they reach us, in Inyan, that the Guf is Kilo Avasar Odom, and to a certain extent it's Michutz LeEtzem Minyonom, Mitzad HaSheni, and therefore the famous Moshel that he was lahachil le'oirei ha'oni b'beisei v'chulu, and after it was mispara that he met the guf. But derech hagav, there's a pele, that's a Indian pili nifla al ha'adom is when you misboinen in that meeting, kommt oisa that tzaddik emes is a mensch what beemes his guf nicht lo kover lo shum davar. He just looks after it because it's a sort of a basar around his bones. Another aspect of it, the Evshe gave him, but he has to look after it. What's he going to do? Of in Yonov are not kavuim alidei inyan akuf. There's a peladike inyan, and therefore we find we see that by the Rebbe, in Yonim Hagufnim weren't Kovea by him, Klau. But he was killed Kovea Kol Inyono al Yedei what he felt had to be done. And, other Inyonim just had to fit in. But they say that there was one, the Rebbetzin, as they printed, and there's that fellow Gansberg has given out a little booklet. Have you seen it? This fellow, the one that he used to be the, Mamish Misholis or Mamish, Bifnim B'Tech Habayis. B'Shas Rebbetzin was still alive, and then after Rebbetzin passed away, he started working personally that way for the Rebbe. You heard about this little fellow? He's called Gansberg. You didn't hear about him? I mean, Tony, you guys never heard about him?
Yeah, I've heard about him.
Oh yeah, he almost lived in the Rebbe's house all the time. Kipshute. Yeah, and he used to eat all the Shabbos and Yom Tovim with the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin. And even the Rebbe would wait for him. For some reason, he was held up and he didn't come. The Rebbe wouldn't make Kiddush until he came. You guys are not familiar with the whole man. So he's Yotzim Vishtikosei, and he's written like a booklet. He gives all these ideas about those things he saw and heard. Yeah. So he says that he brings every now and then that during this particular period of time, the Rebbe was the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin, Ochlu Velonu, this and this deer of the Sifriyah, Ochlu Velonu. So then he writes at the bottom, he says, He'ore, and he says, Kasher Omrim Sharabi Lon, the Rebbe never slept at one bang more than about 4 hours is already a lot. And he said when he used to prepare negavasa, so the Rebbe used to prepare several lots. He said because the Rebbe used to sleep in stages. He would sleep for a while and he would get up and do whatever Rebbe does, and then he would go back again for a while. And then he would get up again, and I said, just going to say that. I said, that was a pure Lon, by the Rebbe. Lon at Nishkaz, and he slept at one bang. He used to do it in Sirugim. And he writes that he used to prepare 2 or 3 negavasas for the Rebbe. So he should have to worry the whole time. Is he going to have another set of negavasas? Yeah. So he said the Rebbe never, as far as he knows, except when the Rebbe was already not feeling so well, he said the Rebbe Nefesh was lon in the way we understand lon Laila Echad. The Rebbe never slept one night, as far as he knows. He used to chop a dremel, stand up, go back again, chop a bit of a dremel, stand up. As he could say. Then he said there were certain times when it was pretty clear, even though he said those people walking around saying the Rebbe did this and the Rebbe did that. He said most people don't know. Nobody really knows, not even he, that he was actually in the house. He can't really say 100% clear, but it appears that there were certain times when the Rebbe didn't sleep at all. But he can't say 100% about that, but it just appears from the way things happened that the Rebbe didn't sleep at all. Anyway, let's get back to our theme. Alpha Panim, and that we see that Korei, the Ramesh, is not in that particular oifen, then his mahus is the mahus of each kuf and his nefesh ativa. And so that's the mahus, the zehu adamatzmei, kemuvu Hashem b'perikotet. So the pula, the makif of chayo, is that it's po'el in the etem ativius and in the etem chumnius of the kuf, and therefore it's po'el in the etem mahus adam, because that's the way he lives, ad l'madrege gavoya yoter, he lives through the guf and the nefesh avamiyat. And therefore the Rebbe attached the uftu. When you are davening al pitam v'das, then you're just, as it were, moving in that particular area. You're just, polishing your tibias. You just got a more edel and better type of tibias. But of course, it's still you and still what you are al piteva. The inif and the rusa deliba is poil a certain shinui bezeh. I take it we'll talk about it more. Anyway, he brings the example that we discussed at great length in the last year of the Ashpos Rav al Talmid, and the effort on the part of the Rav to be mashpia to the Talmid in yonim which are l'mayla mi klei kabbalosei l'klei sichloi, not legamri l'mayla she'en lem kol erech klal, אבל הדרך ההשפעה, הדרך in the השפעה, which is למעלה מעצם כלי המקבל, and we saw that causes at the beginning השינוי in the even of the Kabbalah of the Talmud, until it can even bring to a bittul gomo in the whole makeup of the moichin of the Talmud, ve'ad shehu becomes mesugel to understand the zolche inyonim which he wouldn't have been mesugel klal b'hagshomosei harishona. In other words, he becomes shy to haskolas misug zeh that he would not have been able. In other words, that there's a tremendously accurate way of working at this, whereby you are mashpia beyond the actual chush of the Talmud, not in a way which is just absolutely outlandishly beyond him completely, but in a way that he'll always be going upwards beyond his normal. In other words, not that he takes the askola into his chushim and brings it down, but he elevates himself out of his chushim and out of his normal hagshoma. That's where we were holding, and we saw that was beklal the derech of the Rabbeim with Amiras Chassidus, and it was a whole ino of Talmidei Tmimim that Dafkei the Bochim should learn Zolche Inyonim would demanded of them to go out of their normal mahus and their normal hagshoma and come into Inyonim, which according to that particular doer, and to any doer for that matter, well, these Inyonim were l'mayla, and they were beyond the normal clay HaKabbalah. So we saw that's basically we were holding a few lines before the end of that os, which is tremendously complex and rich inyan, this whole os. So we just go after that brackets, that he's makabel, not the etzem hasoger and the etzem haskola v'hasoger of that inyan, but he's makabel the yoiker, and we saw that that's the reichkeit, the richness and the profundity of the inyan, not lav davki b'hasoger, but he feels that he's got a sensitivity and an awareness of the richness and the profundity of that inyan. Harihu nase b'chinas kli, he becomes a kli. Now that's beklal, he becomes a kli to hasoges. Moy Kain, says the Rebbe, zichruk v'dachas klei hamoyach be'etzem ha'mohus nase gam kein alidei ashpor shelamayla miklei hamoyach. In other words, two inyanim. First of all, we saw that he becomes beklal, able to understand higher sikliim, beyond his normal gather of understanding in haskolas v'hasoges. In other words, he understands and appreciates higher inyanim. Another inyan, says the Rebbe, is that the whole what you might call makeup of the klei hamoyach is mishtane, and what might have been a grover moyach becomes a edler moyach. In other words, that the etzem choyma of the moyach is mishtane be'etzem mahuse. Now that's a much more mahusi type inyan be'etzem ha'pintel than the first inyan, which is just the understanding. But kamuvan, that alidei what he's oisik in these higher scholars, and he gains in them a musik, well, that's poyo on the moyach. But, says the Rebbe, it's not just poyo that he becomes more shayat to hosok, like we saw in the first case, even in how he used to in his hagshoma, he can get shayat to higher in yonim. But it's poyo in that the moyach alters in its etzem mahus. So we have to understand that it means in not only in the etzem dakis of the klima of the moyach, but also he understands and he takes in yonim in a dakis and how do you call it, edel and musha take away. And so that's what he says, Kamoy Kain, just like the ability to grasp higher hasoges alters, so does the etzem zichuk v'dachas klei hamoyach be'etzem ha'mahus nase gam kein alidei ashpor shamayla mi klei hamoyach. So dafki mipnei she'ena yochel lizboyo. That's dafki because the Talmud can't really be stable, he can't really carry and literally bear or pull up with that seichel which is being given. It's too much for him in a way. Ulekabel, and to be really makabel, harizeh poel hashiflos bekli moichei shemizbatlim alidei zeh be'etzem mahusam. In other words, that causes a shiflus, and that shiflus causes a beetle and leads to a shinuyama, a mahus. What it does? I mean, what are the tides? Shiflus. What's the necessity here for shiflus? I mean, shiflus means they're like a cast downness, and that's what he's going to say. If we read another line, he said, "Kamoi kain barusa de liba." What that's in Aveda be'efen klali. The lefisha ava ein lo is shasvus beklei halei hatibi. Har is a poyoboyash pola va beetle arop gefallen kite. And arop gefallen kite means kipshute, how do you call it? Cast downness. Yeah, arop gefallen kite means, arop. How do you call it? A bottle dikke, almost like a misken, it's a brochen mensch, it's a brochen kegel. His battle ali deze mahus hativische loy. Or that causes in the etzim tivis of the mensch a beetle in that mahus of the tivias. Now what is it to it? What's it having over shiflers and what is it the only nyon? What is it having those also? So we could say that there's two like klolium which are going on here. Maybe we talk about the first one. I'm not sure if it's the one that comes first in the klolium, but Al Chaponim will put it first. If you look into Chittas just the other day, we had in Perik, was it in I think it was in the Chittas, or I just happened to look there, I'm not sure, but in Perik Tes Zion, the Alter Rebbe says over there at the bottom of just not far from the end of that Perik, the Alter Rebbe says over there that if he's not oisik in Avodah and in higher hasogas, then hari hu oisik betzorchei gufei bilvad. Oisik betzorchei gufei bilvad. And then he puts in that afilu mishu masmid limudei betivoi hari hu oyev gufei yosef betivoi. So even though he's a gewaltige masmid, he sits to learn the whole time. But really, he likes his goof more than he does the learning, as it were. I mentioned it's allowed to outside. I mean, weird. So here we see an amazing thing that if he's not oisik mamish in avodah pnimius and in trying to be mashana tivoi and to be masig, hoicher inyonim, which will bring mamish to a soyer or some years, then says the Alter Rebbe, hari hu oisik be. Betzarchei Gufe. What did I say? Betzarchei Gufe. We're talking about a ehrliche Yidin Tanya. We're talking about a mensch. We're talking about a mensch that he's really into inyonim. He was thought that he would be Eisha Betzarchei Gufe Bilvat. Well, if he's not Eisha in these inyonim, so we have to say that there's a certain type of doing things where you do things. You daven, you say all the things in the siddur, and you put on tefillin, and you daven, and you do things, and you do mitzvahs, and you do all. Of a sof, you really oisik betzarchei gufoi. How do you call it? You really, you're davening and all those things. That's why Yid has a cholil. If I wouldn't do them, wish it were time for me. I'll just be a complete oisvav. Why do I do all these aninyonim? This is a way. There's got to be an ehrliche Yid. There's a way to get the shefa. There's a way to bring up my children. There's a way to do it. Yeah, if a man comes to us, really all he's doing is just busying himself with a kosher type of life, a good life with a kosher stamp on it, a very high kosher stamp. And he's busy with life, with a kosher life, a good life. So the Rebbe said, that's not a way to say, that's really Torah Gufi. When you look at that every year when I learn that shit, my eyes sort of jolt out from the new when you read that part. It's really very heavy going. So Komta is that you can really be a ish TV even though you look as if you're doing everything, and you're really in a way, but really you're an ish TV. And to a certain extent, like he brought down in the previous chapter, you got a bit of you got a bit the kavada good. He said it's a chumnistic. It's a sort of a material type of Dave, he's really good to me, if to love him, it's really good. It's tremendous. So nicht ever avoider, you know, that's a tight reggae, a tight that.
But halavai we should even get to that much.
And I can't have that, you heard doch nicht. I noch a name here, but we're talking about the point now. Don't spoil the whole thing now by saying, well, I noch a name, but we're toch. Is come to it, you know, otherwise you just should betalen go for boulevard. I mean, was it? That's what the Rebbe is hinting at here. Tibias and Chumrias, you know, they're all like one Mechutin, they're all like one firm. You know, the Tibias joins up with the Chumrias, and the Chumrias makes you Tibias. It's all kilo that you live a very natural type of existence, you know. You think about that, just think about you have your klolim and your pratim and your, you know, and in that, you know, you daven and you learn, you do all the good sachen. But that's what we're talking about here. Das ist the nekuda what the Rebbe brings in Perek Tesayin, and that's what the Rebbe have to have the meaning from Rusa de Liebe, and that's why in Perek Yutayin, at the bottom of the page over there, after the beginning of the Perek, he also mentions something about Rusa de Liebe. Don't state the lesson Rusa de Liebe in Perek Yutayin. In other words, even though the Zekufa Doresh Bia in Tanya, you can never be sure. You know, you got to be very careful about the Lashonas. That's because the answer to all of that is what he says in Perek Yutayin, that it's got to be somehow or another Shviras Tivias V'Achumri, like he brings Takabemshel from Perek Yutayin. And for that you have to have Ru'usa, Muzayin of Zabren, Rotzen, Harikora Mishugayas, Muzayin, always from the Kelim, I mean, you know, Shtapches or something. So that's what the Rebbe says here, that Amamire is the way to be poor, but Etzem Mamahus, what's it got to do with the union of Shiflers? Wie kommt es? Darf sein, was a Shifler say? So Shiflers is not necessarily always a Tnuah for Tshuva. We're going to put to our tshuva in the coming hours. We see that the Alter Rebbe taught in Perek Kaf Ches in Tanya, near the end, he said, what about if a person in the middle of davening is troubled by Machshava Zoris, and Toyer di Moisei B'chozko, he brings over that he can't sort of ignore them. He says the best answer is just to ignore them in the middle of davening, right? In Perek Kaf Ches, and he gives the mashal that a goy would be standing opposite you and trying to be Maval with you and Mishageh you during your davening. The only way to just daven more and more b'kavona and just forget them. You have a shas aveda. Then he said, "Im told him I say b'chazko." Then he has to be mavach. He should mischanen like Kodesh Baruch Hu, the Tevish Rachmanis, and help him. Then he brings it because he's like a son with the father and the Laman. There's a whole big beer and Tony Bifnatman. We're not going into that right now. But before that, he writes Yash Piras Atzmei. Yash Piras Atzmei Hashem, V'yivachish Rachamov, Sheyirachem Olav, Berachamov Haramarubim, Kerachem Albona. What's that from the Yash Piras Atzmei? And he's in the middle of davening, and he says, no, you should be mamshik with the kavona, with the davening. He said, if you're in big trouble, that Yash Piras Atzmei, in the middle of davening, what's he going to do? What is it? It's Yash Piras Atzmei. What will say? He threw himself on the floor, saying, oh, what is it? That's the Yash Piras Atzmei. Elamai, we see that Rachamim Hamarubim, Rachamov Hamarubim, Agilui Amiti, is only when you're a shofar. If you're a geder of something, then you don't get that type of racham. You have to be shofar. Like I brought the story from Reb Mendel of Vitebsk. They used to write about him. You see it in these letters. It's printed in the Sforim where his letters. He always used to sign a shofar b'yemet. Reb Mendel of Vitebsk, like this, unterschreiben HaShofar b'yemet. And I told you the story. There was another chassid who saw that and he decided he would also write that. I told you the man. So we see you've got to be a shofel b'emes, and that is a kli, and that's what's put in certain Drush Chassidus, The Teva, there's an inyan in Rachamim, in Emes Rachamim. I'm not talking about Rachamim which has got a certain Hishtauvus Batam or Beseda Hishtauvus. No, Rachamim Amitiyim, Rachamim Amitiyim, maybe that's the deal also that they used to write in the Panim ones. And I saw there was a Pan that the Rebbe wrote, he also wrote the Rebbe. Even though in later years the Rebbe himself said you don't necessarily need to write all that. But he himself wrote in the Pan that he wrote that they got a copy of it upon him. Er steht dort, that now lo rachamim rabim mim koer, rachamim v'achsodim ho'amitiyim. As I used to write that on the Pan until I heard that the Rebbe said you don't need it anymore. But I used to write that. Mim koer, rachamim v'achsodim ho'amitiyim.
I remember that.
Yeah, you remember? I used to tell the Chavra to do it and everything. Then later on we offered the Rebbe said, you don't need to write me an address, I know what to do, But the Rebbe himself wrote it in the Pan that he wrote the videos, they stayed on to him. Anyway, there's from Rachamim, Chsodim Ha'amitiyim. Whether it is Mim Koyer, Rachamim, Chsodim Ha'amitiyim. Nicht Stam Rachamim. No, Emes Rachamim was Mamish from the Moker. Yeah, it should come down Mamish from the Moker. Well, for that you have to have shiflers. Teva Hamurumam L'Rachim Ala Shofel. That's this brought in Drush Exodus, and that's another type of Rachamim altogether. And for that there has to be shiflers. And this is called Teva. We weiß nicht go for what it is, of what's in the Biub is al Kachahu. Shiflers, muss ein Shifler. And that's what Mendele used to say, Shofel be, that's the Kli to all the Inyonim from Emes Rachamim Chutz Mikol HaGedolim, das is the Kli. Mamere has to be the meaning of shiflers. Now that shiflers doesn't mean stam morish choyra. It doesn't stam mean self-pity but vadaishala. What it means, like he said, shofel PM is you have to derher afarega just how, you are mushlam mikol metzias she'ef shel adaber elo afilu she'ra'ui l'daber elo. You just mamish go it. How do you call it? Correct and positive fashion. You're absolutely gorgeous and cast yourself down. I'm not going to say for clear to there. And you made the Rahman Hamitium. And the father says, Rebbe, he said, the eating for Rusa de Liebe, people that's causing a shinu in the Mahus, and it's causing a shinu in the tibias. Which means, what does it mean, a shinu in the tibias? That you start to live, not how you take Elikus into your pocket and into your pocket and say, oh, I got Elikus, that's great, I've got such a wonderful life. Neither. No, you take Elikus mitzad the Elikus. And you become bottled mitzad the immediate Zainian. And you daher, the Rebbeinu Shalom, nicht Hasoge, nicht gute Sachen, aber daher ist Elikus. To the hero because you have to be shofel, not just bottle. You have to be shofel. You have to be ois. Legamre. Arovifal. Aber nicht morish choyerdik arovifal. You have to be just ois. I'm not talking about the madrege from Bittel B'Matzias. Bittel B'Matzias in corpse. You have to know exactly what you are and who you are. But, alright. Then he gets to this whole business, he stops living through himself the whole time. He doesn't live through his own tibias. Hooked on Herrn, hooked on Herrn. He's vergeten van Bim. Koimoi, and then andere was werd veilig, of it becomes veilig in the Emes Oiven, wie es darf zu sein. And that's what he says. Harizeh, where are we? Mahus HaTibishale. V'zeu de Avarabbe. What Avarabbe is Rusa de Liebe. Imi yoish, shabo mitzad ha'iseiris anishom mitzad atzma, we asked before. Eigentlich, das ist the nishom in a hoich oiven, not got to do with the slapshes beguf. Ve'in leze shaykh el aguf klar. No. He said, Davki, because that is a inyan atzmi, and that is a inyan amiti was deher telekus. Mitzad the amiti is a inyan, well, that's how to be poil in the goof, even though the chayra is not with the goof. It's a dag ruchnis was lamaila mi a goof. A doch that can be poil in the goof. He said, "Ko makim harizen okay ele chumriyes o poil bitel hammer hoos." In other words, the koi that you're a perikov testiker, then your mahus is your chumriyes. If I were to be poil a shinoi dot, you have to be nogea toich the pinimi the chumriyes. It's pele. In other words, you have to start hearing Elikus. And that's Perik Tazayin. If you look carefully in Perik Tazayin, well, that's what he said. In Tot in Tani. Tussen der woord, Oise Petarchi Kufi. Every time I sit around, and mom is fall off the chair, you know, Oise Petarchi Kufi. Yeah, you live off a ganze Leben, you know. The old time is just, ganz fine. That's what you can understand.
The Ikar is the goof and the Tafel the Neshama.
Eh?
The Ikar is the goof and the Tafel the Neshama.
How does the goof come to the neshama?
No. But what you're saying is the Ikar is the goof and the Tafel is the Neshama.
Yeah, that's in Perikot. That's what he says over there. He said that's the Mahus HaOdam. He who HaOdam Bi'atzmai. As I said, the goof and the Nefshama. Abahomi is, what are they? They're Chumriyas. The left the Reilon. Now Hillel Zochen was the one who had it right. He's got that's what he says there. He said, in order to be poor in that bitl amahus, yeah, then you have to have a inyan which comes lamayla mikol zeh, and dafki because it's a high inyan, it's a machiv dike inyan, it's able to touch into those inyanim how they are in etzem pinto. Omnam is liyeshes el arusa de libe shabo ben neshama mitad atzmei. So it comes purely mitad the ruchnias of the neshama, and in a hoicha madreya vidul. Yeah, how does it really come to the body? Oh, he said it does, but he said there is apchinas machiv de chayer levad. It still remains a inyan machiv. Right? It's takir. Poil in the chumriyas, and daki because it's in atzmi, it's poil in the chumriyas. Obviously, it's like a machif is poil. It's not that you really become mishtane be'etzim pnimiyas, and that oil is mislavish mamish in you. No, it becomes how do you call it, an ogeya. It affects and changes somewhat, and is mavalbu upon him the chumriyas because it comes in the form of a makiv. It's a yin of an oyer makiv, and it's poil all those in yonim. Or in other words, it's not azar hoicha makiv that makiv itself can become pnimi. It still remains in even for makiv. Yeah, therefore, like you might say, it's givaldik and it's tremendous. But ultimately, it also didn't change your mamish and etzemamahus. It just affects the etzemamahus. And so you go around moving a bit out of the etzemamahus, of the tibius and the chumias, but it could be that, if you're not in that situation which demanded that type of service, then you might slip back somewhat. And that's what we find, ulai. Maybe that's a beer, but the Russish Yidden, a lot of them used to, when they came to America, the Medinas, they used to say that when they were in Russia, they lived with all this unbelievable stuff, all these, and they were chutzmi, kola gedorim, now they're back over here to all, for balbatis, and they don't feel the whole reichheit and the whole seres that they felt, they even become a little bit sort of, balbatish, and they feel magushim legabi what they were then, and so on and so on. So I heard once the Rebbe spoke about that, Rebbe Tomo Geratzen there, by Fabrengen. Although upon him, that's the inyan, that sometimes the seres can be very deep and it can be very profound, and for sure it affects the chumriyas. Those people didn't have any chumriyas dike cheshpoinas. They didn't know what it was. They didn't have any tibias dike cheshpoinas. The whole existence was just like Amri Mechutla Darka Teva. It was just, mamish. But it's only ayin for machiv sofkosov. It's not mamish the slabshas that are machiv pepnimius mamish, even though it affects all of those in yonim, lezman mesuyam or lateikef mesuyam and chelik mesuyam michayo. But if he moves into a situation where that inyan is not demanded and it's not begolui, then since it was only a machiv, it can sort of, as it were, withdraw. It's not kilu kolon anymore, and he doesn't somehow or another manage to get to that anymore, therefore it can retreat. In other words, it's not that the makif took him over completely. It's still a makif. This is a political chapter. I mean, there's very viel in Yonim Waffen zu der Liebe in Avodas Hashem. Kitzer. Omnam Rusa der Liebe she'ein aleiv meichel ve'ein maravet shimo oinoi. In other words, we saw that in Avodas Shapitam Vadas, he does take the Ava, and on the contrary, it gets Davki an Ava, which is true and in a Kli, and it causes him how do you call it, quenching of his thirst. He's very happy with his Ava, and he feels fulfilled. Mishana Etzem, since it's not like that, Rusul de Liebe, therefore it has an effect on the very essence of the mensch. Be'alter Moshe Keches HaPnimiyim Li'yesem Nitfosim Bekelim, Barach haro oson mispashetes beivorim achitzenim, like we saw in Meiser and other inyonim, poilim bohem rakli akev hispash tuson. So they cause in the chitzenis of the nefesh apam is only a preventation of him taking over altogether. They don't really change the very essence of the nefesh apam. Ve'arotzen she'etzem nimshach poyo gam behepech hateva. Arotzen, what he's more a etzem diker, then he can be poyo, a heipach of the teva. He can be nagea of the teva and cause you to lose the whole rulership of the teva. Vadug melamaila, the essence spirits ain't safely his pashtuson, and that's only in Atzilas. Obabiyah nimsha racha ora. It's only a ora which comes down into the Olam Sanifroim. Imloi alidei koyach elam. We saw that by Kriyas Yamsuf, the etzem madrege of Atzilus was nimshach in the biyah alidei kadmon yisholelam, which was meya from Lagamri Lamaila me Atzilus into Atzilus, and that caused a chiv of Atzilus mit biyah. Of a normal, we don't have that. The whole in of Atzilus is only a mamutza, and therefore it's only mamshich a ha'ora from itself into Elam as biyah. Ve'er ain't safe meya gamba biyah or poyo behem habidl. He said that when the Eir ain't safe, not just Atzilas, but the Eir ain't safe Shalamayla me Atzilas is the Kavanah. Eir ain't safe is the Kavanah on the Eir Shalamayla me Atzilas. Meya gamba biyah, it's able to be meya also into Bria Yitzirva, see, because it's not limited by the Kalim. Upoyo behem habidl. And therefore it causes them a bit. V'keinu ba'avoida, bi'ava shebetam v'das, and then Rusada Liba is a higher. But like he pointed out, that in Oilamas, when the Yeshalamayla Meya spheres is Meya into the spheres and Oilamas, then that causes that bittul b'mahusam b'derech kimat b'derech mamera. Ma'ashekin etala odom, ba'avidos, it's dafki with the inim from Yagir, an effort to bring the Gili, the Lamayla Mitam Vadas, into Gili. And the bittul has to be like you might call a working, conscious bittul. He's got to work at it. Is then lo yoytze me'akshemose, then he doesn't go out of his basic gashmistike magushmkeit. Validei ashpoas sichliyim shalamayla michushov. When the Rav gives him in Yonim, which are dafki lamayla michushov, hari yum is dachik be'etzem hagsho mosei. He changes, and we saw in that two in Yonim, aleph that he's able to grasp sichlim not lefi erakoi, and zweitens is that the etzem kli itself is the etzem choyma hamoyach is misdachik or misaleh alideisem. However, says the Rebbe, now in Rechev, we now come to Rechev, but Rechev is Einam for Bittel, how do you call it? Sus Verichboy, next week's parsha from Yud Shvat, it's got to do with Rechev. Because says the Rebbe, who b'kitera shebaheichom, shehuinyan Rusa de Liebe. When we saw that Rusa de Liebe is the rotzen of the leib, it's a madrege shalamayla tam badas or mayla mi akoiches, of a sof koso, it has a certain shaykhs to the pnimi. Shazeh mamshik milmayla beginas makiv aval who beginas chitenius akes okamation is boili perik yud reish yud ches. Well, that's perik reach, by the way. That's interesting. Perik reach. Over there we had, and it's well known that reach is eating for makiv. we're still going to mention over here again, as that's the inyan of Amshochas HaMakif, but sof kotzov, it's a makif ha-poyel v'mesayeh b'gilui ha'pnimi. Oh, he's not a mitius HaMakif, it's not a mitius bitl kol mahusa. Omnam, he said, ha-keteros de Yom HaKippurim, there's another level in keteros, and that's the keteros that the Kohen Gadol prepares on Erev Yom Kippur, and he takes davki into Yom HaKippurim, into the Kodesh HaKadoshim on Yom HaKippurim itself. Shemaknisim b'Kodesh HaKadoshim. So he said, Hu inyan ha-teshuvah. He said, that's another inyan altogether. Well, that's another level in Makif, in Avodah, Avodah Sodom. And he said, that's a Makif ha-nimshach alidei teshuvah. So you might say, well, Teshuvah man t'char shmei, you know. In our time and age, who's got time for tshuva? So you see, but you have to have time for tshuva. So he says, "B'kodesh hakadoshim hu inyan ata teshuva." Ukediisa b'medrash Rabbah shirashirim al posik eshkel hakoifer. Omer Rabbi Yitzchak v'chiso anan haktoiras es hakapoiras. That's when he went into the Kodesh hakadoshim. Then he used the keteros to cover over the whole matzav how it was in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, including the kapoiras. It covered the Aron HaKodesh, it covered everything. So it says that's what's written in the posik. Kisoa anana keteros es kapoiras, and so on. Hakisu hazeh, says Rabbi Yitzchak, is medaktik. Hakisu hazeh einanu yodim mahu. We don't really know from the pasuk itself what is the inyan that the keteros had to, as it were, cover the whole heikel. It had to cover everything in the heikel, and you couldn't even see the kapoiras and the Aron HaKodesh, but the Elyon, because they were all covered by the kapoiras. It would be enough to say you took in the keteros. You made keteros inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim. You know, you made a bit of keteros. You Maria the keteros, right? No. V'chiso anan haktoiras es hakaperos kol ha-kodesh hakadoshim. There had to be a kisui al yedei the inyan of the keteras. So he says we don't really know just from the pasuk what was the point of that whole kisui. Why did it have to cover everything? Kisui hazeh ein on yodim mahu ad shebo David. We have to wait until we have David and Sefer Tehillim. And then we know what was the real inyan of that kisui, which means for Torah's Yidden were machaseh in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the Kohen Gadol, and nobody really knew what was the amitis ha'inyan until came along David HaMelech. I mean, just Derech Hagav, it's not really no again the Pshat HaMedrash. Oh, you know, it's a bit of a pillar. What did they do all the time? Well, I suppose you could say, well, the Beis HaMikdash wasn't built yet. David HaMelech was pretty early in the situation. But the whole time in the Mishkan, and even in the Mishkan, how it was already in Shiloh and other places, we just have to say that the Etzem and Neshama knew what was going on, and you knew what they had to do. Of it wasn't really mefurish the Yediyah Brura. So there was David, Shebo, David, Upirushoi, Nososo, Avin, Amelcha, Kesisa, Eschol, Chatosom, Selo. The Pasuk can tell him, Nososo, Avin, Amelcha, you bear the Avin, you put up with it, but Kesisa, Kol, Chatosom, Selo, and you cover all that Chatoim. So come days, at such a moment where the Kohen goes into Kodesh HaKadoshim and he's got the Keteros, he makes a tremendous cloud of the Keteros in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Chatoim, man Chashmei, wie kommen daher den von Chatoim mit der ganzen Duet? Elamai, you'll say it doesn't mean mamish chait, even in the simple sense. It means Chatoim, in a more delicate way, of Sokolsov. Like the famous Taich, the Friedrich Rebbe teaches in them on Yom Kippur, the word chait means the fact that you think you're clean. The rest of the mounds, because it's very well known that there's verbs and nouns in Lashon Kodesh, but they can be touched in two exact afochim. Now, which chait can mean a chet va'ovin, adov viltirotzu. But then we say lechatei es habayis, that is even purifying and bringing raincoat and everything. Nowadays they talk in the modern Hebrew they talk about chitui. Chitui means cleanliness, or cleaning something up. Immer mehr, da kommt er, der Diener von Chet can also, so the Friedrich Rebbe said, no, it's in Tzadik Tesed, a man from the Friedrich Rebbe, where he says on Yom Kippur, when you come to the real high union of Tshuva on Yom Kippur, the Kodesh, Kadoshim, and the ganze, he said, what does the word Chet mean over there? It means what you think that you are really clean. Chatei, you are Chatei as Hatzmacha, and that's the emphasis of Chet that he's fixing on Yom Kippur. You think, oh yes, I've done Tshuva and I've cleaned myself up, and I am in the midst of cleaning myself up, and isn't this good? And no. Oh no. He got this deep inside that little featherly, she didn't get it yet. I don't know if anybody knows the slight sarcasm that I'm referring to. But anyway, Lafizeh, we see that whatever may be the madrega of those chatoim, whatever dag it might be over the keteros on Yom Kippur, it covers them over. So the Rebbe said, what's that first? And that we see that the inyan of the keteros, even in its highest madrega, how it goes into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, has got to do with cleaning up, what you might call some of the faults, some of the failings, or the cleanlinesses of the Jewish people. He come to us. Therefore, we have to say that there was some inyan that when a Kohen brought that keteros, he brought the tshuva of Yidden. He brought they're going back to the Eivishter. Therefore, the Eivishter said, they brought in this keteros with that spirit, with that inyan. Chisisi kol chatosim. This is how they call it, the beginning of a whole new inyan that will forget it and will completely, throw it out. Well, that's the inyan from Tashlich b'Tzulas Yom kol chatosim. Hooray! The inyan ha-keteros hu inyan ha-teshuva. It's a sign that the bringing of the keteros, that's what Yidden have said to the Eivos. Look, we're with you, and we're coming to you, even of going back from all those chatoim, all those inyanim which brought the chatoim. So then the Eivos said, it does. In other words, it's not a beautiful free deal. It's not that they were saying, here's the Kohen Gadol, and he's come into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and he's covered everything over, and you guys can just have a good start all over again, have a good day, This does. Now, the inyan from bringing the keteros into the heichal is the spirit of tshuva. That's the inyan. That itself is the inyan of the tshuva. And Mamerech Chisisi kol chatosom seva. In other words, Chisisi means a inyan from kisui legamre kilo, also a cloud. Does that mean? There's a simon that the tshuva must have been on a very high madrega. It must have been the very essence of Yidden. That's the third pshat. Who in tshuva shall they say mamshich b'chinas atzmas ein tzeit mamish haynu b'chinas pnimius ha-keser. And pnimius ha-keser is where the Eibishter goes back to his one and only keser with Yidden, pnimius atik. And that's what we're going to mention a little bit further on. You remember we had earlier what he called over there the inyan from kutra, from Lashon keteros, kutra, which means a knot in Aramic. You had a kesher atzmi of atik with the etziminian from Rashis kol ha'ishtalshalos. That's the inyan from Pnimis HaKesef, where the Eivos begins the whole inyan of having anything to do with everything he brought about. What makes all that possible and what makes it able to remain is the kesher with Yidden. Yidden are the Pnimis of the whole thing. By inyan says the Rebbe, Dehinei be'idor rabba Daf Kuf Lamed Omed Beis, but the Idor Rabbah is in Pasha Nosei, that's the Zohar, HaKodesh Pasha Nosei, and the Idor Zutra is in Pasha Azino, that's at the end of the Zohar. That's one on it. The Idor Rabbah means the great shiur, the great coming together of Talmidim to hear the Rav. That's what Idra means. This is called Idor Rabbah because it's a lot of very remarkable Seidas that Rashbi and his Talmidim revealed in that shiur. Isa do more de chutma. that do means here in this particular madrega. In other words, we're talking over there about a level which is literally the owner of the nose. More the chutma. Choitem means the nostril, literally. More means somebody who's got it, the owner of it. We're talking about the Eibishter over there, how he's literally the owner, he's the balabas of the nostril, the nostrils. Yeah, this is one of the famous lesson that occurs in another place. That was it who said it? Rav Amenena Saba, that he said, "Lebala choitem ani mispalel." I davened after the balachoitem. It's in the same general meaning. So he says, "The more the chutma michad nukva chayim." He said, from one literally nostril, there is chayin. That he called life, literally chayin. Or michad nukva chayin de chayin. He said, from the other nostril is life of life. In other words, in one nostril I can reach chayin, and in the other nostril I reach chayin de chayin. For who says the menekiv hayumin, from the right hole of the nose, nofik chayin. That comes out ultimately. There is miskale, the level called chayin, or menekiv hasmol nofik chayin de chayin. And we're going to be medactic later, while not the other way, and that's what he brings. Well, but Sefer Koil Baramo, but the Koil Baramo is a Sefer Biur on the Zoya, on certain parts of the Zoya, and if I'm not mistaken, Animasupik, if that's maybe from the certain Haguras from the Ramach himself, I'm not sure, because the Ramach wrote a big long Biur on the whole Zoya, which is another Sefer, not Koil Baramo, but anyway. I'm not sure who's the Mechaber that Sefer. Of a Sefer Koil Baramo Kosev Lahipach. He wants to say, wait a minute, if we're talking about the higher Madrega, the higher Madrega has to come from the right. So L'chera, Chayin, the Chayin should be the right, and the left should be Chayin. However, the Rebbe says, Achi said, B'ksovim Isha Kanal. In Ksovim, that means in Herikoet. Chassidische Ksovim, and the Chassidische Maimorim and Ksovim, or it could mean the Kisvei Arizal. It possibly means the Kisvei Arizal. He says, Isha Kanal. It's the other way, the way I have written it for you, that from the right one goes only Chayin, and from the left one goes Chayin de Chayin. And we'll see later, a diktuk and a biur, why is it that the higher level is shayat darki to the left nostril? So now he teaches Bahain base makifin the chayaviyah chida. In other words, it's one on, but the Lashon of the Kodesh chayin means chaya, and chayin the chayin means yechida. Because the Lashon nefesh ruach neshama chay yechida is a Lashon of the Medrash. It's one that occurs in the Medrash. Of in the Zohar Kodesh we find the expression chayin the chayin. So that's the two madregas of Chai Yechida. The Hine said Achoitem Hu Kli Horeya. That's the one, huh? He said of Bedera Klau. He said of Horeya, Bedera Klau Hu B'chinas Makiv Kanal Perek Yud Reish Yud Zayin. What we had over there a few talking back, a whole big arichas, if you remember, about what do we have over there, Reish Yud Zayin. At the end that he brought over there that you remember about the Basmera that she was Maria the Tzikei Kedela, and over there he said there's the Tzikei Kedela is eating from Birurim of Noiget Avki Lamata Ba'ilam Statatoinim, and he said that's Moira the eating from Reah, and he says because Reah is really the Makipim of Oil Matoyu. He said, the Indian of Birurim, we go back into the Makipim of Eirem Matoyu, and when mamshich them into the Kelim of Tikkun, and that's the Indian Araya. The Indian Araya is the Indian for Makkim. I don't know if you guys remember so many weeks back, but we did actually learn it. Very good time, Reishu time. So, he says that Reah is the Indian for Makiv, Rach, Shemenekiv HaYomini Nimshek Chayin, Hu B'chinas Makiv de Yosho, Shazo B'chinas Makiv de Chayo. That's only the Makiv HaShaykh Elap אלא פנימי. ומנקב השמאלי, בחינס מקיף דויר חויזר, בחינס יחידה. So we can always sort of begin to picture why that would be shach, אלא small. Because the inyan van Chayzer got to do with gevulas, with the inyan van tikboiras, the ability to go back to Afkem Mata Lamaila, what that's the inyan van Shem Membeis, the inyan van gevulas, Valiyas, Kilo Kvitza, Vidilo, Klapi Maila. That we'll see as we go along as one of the timing why that shai dafke to the Neikev HaSmoli. V'yo inyan, the inyan says the Rebbe Abachaye Kosov al Posik Vayetzer. Vayitzar Vayelakim Odom Mina Adoma. This is with two Yuden. Da Choitem, he says, Kli, and then he writes with the Yipap Apov Nishmas Chayim, right? The Yipap Odom Mina Adoma, Vayipap Apov Nishmas Chayim. So the Bechai, the Rabbeinu Bechai writes over there, Da Choitem Kli Leneshomher. The Mishom, he nichneses, and Mishom he yates. The Rabbeinu Bechaya says that the Yipap Apov means his nose. So they absolutely blew the neshama in through the nose, and Rachmanin Etlan b'shas yitzias the neshama, then it goes out through the nose. V'lochein is a misha nofel alov mapoilas. Trichim livdoik oisoi ad choitmoi. Kedisha begemora yuma daf pei hey omid ale. But the Gemara they're talking about the inyan from Pikuach Nefesh, that when are you allowed to be Machal Shabbos for somebody? So if they fell on him a mapus, means a whole wall of stones fell on top of a mensch or chmonin and tlan, and you managed to take away some of the stones. To take away the stones as it is on Shabbos. Therefore, you take away stones, and you find him. Then you have to check: is he still alive? If he's Rachman dead, you're not allowed to pull any more of the stones off. But if there's a sign that he's still alive, then he can go ahead and be Machal Shabbos weiter, and he can finish the ganze inyan. So how do you know? How can you check if he's alive? So if you can get to his heart, then you can fill his heart. But then the Gemara says that even that's not a raya. That even if his heart is not working, it could be that he's still alive, and one can still save his life. And that is if if there's still breath in his nose. If there's still breath, and there's a way the Gemara says that they can test that with a feather or something, they can see if he's actually still breathing in his nose. Then you're allowed to go ahead and be Machal Shabbos, because that's a sign that there's still a possibility of bringing the chayas back into the whole guf, because the Iker Achiza of the chayas is in their nose, not in the heart. They state that in the Gemara. And I said the Gemara, even we can't recognize it in his heart anymore. Look at the Pirush Rashi Sham, as he stated to Rashi, that's why you have to be beidik afilu adha achoitem. It's not enough just to go as far as the lave. You have to go all the way up to the nose. V'sham begemora ubeseita daf memvav omad beis deliini chayusa hakel moedim diike chayusa biape hu. Yeah, what the Gemara says there, and also in another sugya. In Masechta Seita, maybe we'll talk about that a little more in another shir. I just want to reach a point here because I have to finish now. He said, it's written over there that the Iker Chayas of a mensch is Dafke B'choit Moi. That's the Iker Chiza of the Chayas is Dafke there. V'yesh Leimer, Shazol Lefisha Achoitem Ushara Moichen. He said the reason why it is that it could still be that there's a chayas which is savable and returnable to the whole system of the mensch, if he's still got a certain breath in his nose. He said because the choyte with the shara moichin, v'chein mashma begemara. We'll talk about the sugya. The kemoisha peh hu shar haleiv, v'zeu shadibu hu me'apeh shabo mehevel haleiv, kemoikein achoytem shar hamoichin. So we're going to see an amazing thing, that The heart gives off, how do you call it, avir, and or how do you call it, hevel, and that hevel comes out later in the inif and dibur, or in the inif and midas, and the midas cause the inif and dibur, and that's a very basic inyan in chayes. Of it's not the etzem mokeh v'shorosh of the chayes, and it's not the ikar achiza of the chayes in the guf. The ikar achiza of the chayes is in the moyach, and the way to the moyach is through the choitim. The direct kesher with the moyach is the tafkid for the choitim, and that's what he says. The choitim mishara amoyach. That's what the Alter Rebbe Masber in Tanya in Perik Nun Aleph, that the ikar hashuas kol achayes shebeguf. Is that working? Is it? Also, I notice that there's a light on up there. That's working.
Yeah.
What's it do? Giving a hot air or cold air? Maybe it's just sort of on and it's not doing anything.
It's like in the middle.
Yeah. Anyway, Bamele says the Alter Rebbe over there, the Ikar Hashuas, Hachayes is in the Moyach Tafkid. Ikar Hashuas Hachayes is in the Moyach, and Mia Moyach Mispashet L'Kola, L'Chola Eivorim. So we're going to see that that's Mamish Pshitas Kach. That the Ikar Hashua Hachayes, which is shy to be Machaya the Guf, the Tafkid in the Moyach, or Al Chaponim Shoira, Ala Moyach, and the way, the shar into that Amitius Achiza, and that Amitius Kishur between the Amitius Achayes and the Moyach is the nose, the Choitim Davke. So we'll see about that in the coming Inyanim, and therefore the Choitim is a very amazingly important Inyan, and that's in the Kuda of the Zohar Kodesh where he says L'bala Choitim, and he mispalel, because that's the Amitius Amshocher of the Kutra, Kavior the Atika, that's the Amitius Akesher of the Ein Sof with the whole Inyan of the Shtolshas HaOlamus, and Kavior through that the Evshah can hear the prayers, otherwise he just completely moved it, was the type. Adavki through that Kutra, and that Kutra is Be'emes Alidei Amoichem. So we'll see about that in further and coming episodes.